Sweeping through the isolated northwest region of Vietnam, contours along the lush green slopes of the majestic Hoàng Liên Sơn mountain range, the mystical Da River weaves like a silken strip of raven hair, her wavy locks embellished by deadly jagged rocks and dainty mountain wildflowers. On a dewy 1920 morning, navigating her furious streams was a fragile wooden boat transporting a group of merchants and their livelihoods on their weekly trips upstream to the highlands. On this boat, the only one who could read, a young girl of 16 with hair as long as the Raven River and hot as fierce as her ferocious waves, entertained the boatmates by reciting from memories the classic books of Vietnamese poetry and stories. Though she received no formal education, a privilege reserved for her brothers, she accomplished what most scholars can only aspire to do. This young girl, the original storyteller on the Da River, was my great-grandmother. By the age of 15, my great-grandmother was reciting classic books of Vietnamese poetry and literature from memories, despite never receiving a formal education like her male family members. By the age of 18, her brilliant mind convinced her father-in-law to teach her everything he knew about the family's Eastern medicine practice, which she would manage for the next 25 years. By the age of 43, her village and home were pillaged by the French, and her husband was shot dead in their own home, the same home that the colonizers turned into their headquarters soon afterwards. 3 months later, she gave birth to a daughter who did not survive the poor living conditions of the refugees, and as I learned the century-long saga that was her story, I pondered, what could this woman have achieved if she was allowed to reach her full potential? On a cruel morning in 1947, my great-grandparents' village was attacked by French forces. As my great-grandmother was guiding their children to take refuge in the jungle, my great-grandfather stayed behind to watch the house, but the colonizers' cold weapon did not care that he had 5 children and a pregnant wife. As I heard a family member's recount of the story, they gave one signal and he was gone. There was no photo left of him. His friend was able to quickly bury his body in the farmland where he was shot, and my great-grandmother could only formally retrieve him 2 years later. Their house was commandeered into a French headquarters. The daughter she was carrying died shortly after birth, and the rest of their children, including my grandmother, carried the trauma of losing their father that would ripple through the next 3 generations. But to the colonizers, he was simply one signal. On the chaotic morning of May 1st, 1975, my great-grandmother and what was left of, or what could be found of her family, had spent 2 horrific days at standstill on a refugee barge with nothing but the merciless ocean beyond their horizon and the scorching sun above their heads. Faced with imminent death by the hour, they were relieved to learn that U.S. commercial ships would be sent to rescue the refugees in batches. My great-grandmother, her 2-year-old grandson, and her daughter-in-law were among the first batch to be picked up, separating them from the men. Once they landed on the ship, my great-grandmother stoically told her daughter-in-law, "From now on, your focus is to raise and protect your son. You don't worry about where your husband is." And I cannot imagine the strength it took, nor would I ever want to know what it was like to be forced into a position where I have to choose between my son or my grandson.